Hey there, and welcome to the B2B Marketing Asia podcast. I'm your host, Joe Escobedo. And today, very, very excited. We're going to mix things up a little bit. We don't have just me, we have some other special guests. Firstly, let me introduce Aubrey Lynn, who is a social marketing lead APAC at London Stock Exchange.
Hello,
Next,
everyone.
wonderful. Thanks so much, Aubrey. Next, we have Nicole Wang, who is the regional marketing manager at LucaNet.
Hi there, nice to be here.
And finally, we have Lester Swalog, who is managing director APAC at System One Research. Lester, thanks so much for joining us too.
Thank you, Joe, for having us.
Absolutely, really excited to have you guys here because today we're going to be talking about LinkedIn ads. And I know I personally have seen a lot of different mistakes companies have made. I've seen some really good ones, but I'd really love to hear from you guys. Maybe we dive in and let's hear about some of the biggest mistakes either you have made personally or maybe you've seen companies make when it comes to LinkedIn ads. So anyone, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, so perhaps I'll start. Coming from the research agency background, well, it's easy to spot mistakes, but it's also a body of work of a lot of people. So I'd like to appreciate it and of course give justice when it's due. However, when it comes to looking at the diagnostics of effective campaigns or ads on LinkedIn, we have to look at, of course, the return on investment as well as its creativity. So it's easy to spot mistakes, for example, if it doesn't deliver in those two things. But we can also deliver in those two things. So one thing that I actually noticed recently is the rise of short-termism, in which Peter Field of the IPA in London, in the Institute of Practitioners in Advertising in the UK, which is a body of research and advertising organizations based out of the UK, said that nowadays we're facing the crisis in creativity. So there's a lack of creativity in terms of delivering a campaign. It's quite a brutal statement, but yes, it's just because of the fact that we're very much short-term orientated. And I'll explain more of that later. I want to hear from the rest of the panelists.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, a lot of times it is short term, but it goes back to your point, the return on investment. And you mentioned creativity is one of the key elements. I think that's one of the things that's unfortunately lacking in a lot of B2B ads on LinkedIn is creativity. A lot of companies tend to do plug and play the exact same template. But like I said, I know Aubrey and Nicole, you guys have been experimenting with some different things too. So I'd love to hear from your end, what are some of the things that, let's start with mistakes. What are some of the mistakes that you've either made or you've seen other companies make?
Yeah, sure. I will go next. So I totally echo what Lester said about the creativity, because it is, because when we are thinking about the advertising, I believe many B2C companies, they spend quite a lot in design and creativity, while B2B companies feel like, that's not really our thing. But I think creativity is really one of the biggest component to drive a successful ad campaign. Because imagine when we are using, LinkedIn advertising, some people, they are scrolling through their ad feed and they might just mindlessly scroll through. And creativity is really something to grab users' attention in the first 1 or 2 seconds. Otherwise, they will just say, oh, it's always the same thing, and I might just go to the next one. So I think, creativity is quite important, and it's really like something triggered your user experience, and it's the most important thing to retain your user attention. So I totally agree with that. And from my point of view, so other than the creativity, because I also see this kind of mistake quite a lot on LinkedIn. So other than creativity, I think I see quite a lot of B2B companies make mistakes on the ad messaging. Because, let's just break this down. When users see an ad, the first thing is creativity is to, retain their attention. They stopped, and then what's the next thing? The next thing is ad advertising, because they stopped, and then because they want to read more this is about, and this is where the advertising ad messaging comes in play. And this is also where I see some B2B companies make mistakes, because I see some companies trying to promote a product via LinkedIn ad, but going a little bit too overthinking on the ad messaging, like trying a little bit too hard on using some fancy words or some terms, or just talking about the brand itself to expect to retain the prospect's attention. However, in B2B, from my perspective, in B2B market, if the objective of the ad is to drive sales, and then the most important thing here is to communicate the value of your product to the prospects in a very concise manner. Avoid using all the jargon or fancy words, because the decision-making process in B2B world is much more complex than B2B, and the decision maker is usually not just one person. So eventually, what we want to achieve is to make sure the person who saw the ad, read the message, and intrigued by the message can communicate the core value of your product to his or her team colleague or manager. So that's why I think, ad messaging is probably the second most important thing, comes after the creativity, and also where I see some companies make a lot of mistakes here.
Yeah, absolutely. I got to agree with you wholeheartedly. That's one thing that I was smiling about, because I'm constantly telling companies to kind of trim the fat. They overwhelm us with too much information, whether it's too much text or graphics. And a lot of times it's information overload. It's tough to catch your attention and understand what it is, especially when you're, like you said, you're scrolling through in your thumb. Nicole, what are your thoughts? What are we missing so far?
Great points from the speakers. And just to add on maybe to Aubrey's point on the type of content, especially when talking about your product, one mistake that I've made myself, and I do see other B2B companies make, is to try to create an advertisement on webinars as a lead gen activity. I have seen LinkedIn ads that are promoting product webinars, and to me the question is, why would I be interested in watching a 1-hour demo of your product if I've not heard about your company before? And to me, I've made a mistake myself. It was wishful thinking. I think that maybe by promoting my webinar, I would get immediate MQLs that come into the pipeline that can pass on to sales. But oftentimes it's not as easy. You need to start off with more top of the funnel content that would interest your target audience in the first place, and slowly nurture them to bring them to want to attend a webinar. And that is through nurturing, through newsletters, and that takes time and effort. It's not as easy as just promoting your webinar and expecting people to join. And for myself, the cost per lead went sky high for that campaign, and the click-through rate wasn't that fantastic. So I would say if you are a new B2B marketer thinking to run a webinar ad campaign on LinkedIn, I would advise against it.
Awesome. I appreciate you being so transparent with your experiences. I think it's very, very helpful for everyone listening. So you brought some very good points in terms of creativity, in terms of messaging, in terms of promoting, I guess, the right activities. Now I'd love to get your thoughts on, we've talked about some of the mistakes. What are some tips you can do? Start off with creativity, because I think it's one that we kind of, start with to capture people's attention. Lester, or, anyone else here, what are some of the most creative campaigns either you have done or you have seen personally?
Well, I think that's a very good question. Probably a lot of people are thinking that maybe B2C or B2B are really different from each other in terms of putting out your marketing communications out there. At the end of the day, what we found out in research through the years is that even the boardroom gets very emotional. Of course, guided by human wisdom in terms of decision making, but they also feel the same emotion that B2C markets also feel. So in terms of the many examples we could see, I think one that I really like is the gorilla ad of Cadbury back in the day in the UK. It's so simple yet it's so epic, and there's so many more. There are also a lot of B2B campaigns out there, even insurance, banks, who try to actually portray human emotions, and they're quite successful at it. At System One, we have this mantra, and I usually actually sometimes overemphasize it in all my talks and in all my webinars like this, that the more people feel, the more people buy, regardless whether it's in the boardroom or at the store.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think it's some very good points. And I've talked about this in my class as well, the power of emotions. And I think the Thai insurance companies do it very, very well. They always create these very emotional ads. I'm wondering if something like that works for a LinkedIn format, though.
Well, yes, I think you're able to inject emotions, particularly if you're able to tell a story. Because for the longest time, whenever we test B2B ads or messaging through a B2B platform, there's a lot of flatness. That it's all about a flat storytelling. But I think probably in the past it was able to make a dent in terms of ROI. But nowadays, people would like to listen to a beautiful story, listen to a connection. So listen to the in-betweenness of things. Listen to how people could trigger the call to action in a way that is longer lasting rather than just in the moment. And I think some brands and companies are quite successful already in doing emotional marketing in a B2B context.
Yeah, absolutely. I can share some examples, but I'd love to hear from Aubrey and Nicole as well, if you guys have any experience running emotional ads on LinkedIn.
Personally, for our team, I'm not sure if it's exactly emotional, but we try to inject a bit of humor when it comes to our B2B ads, because a lot of times when we see B2B ads, my first thought is always, why so serious? It's always about the product. It's the same download on ebooks or webinars, etc. But for us, we tried to create a campaign that focuses on animal analogies. So we try to talk about how the work of a CFO, it's the same as a certain type of animal, and there's a certain reason as to why it is, a bit like Zootopia. And I thought that campaign it did really well, probably because we tried out something that's really different, quite creative, and quite humorous to the audience. When it comes to B2C, we always, as a B2B marketer, I'm always jealous about what B2C marketers are doing. Their advertising is so creative, so funny, but to me is why don't we try the same? What is really stopping a B2B marketing person from doing the same? So we did it, and it worked well for us.
Awesome. I love that example. Like I said, really, I think it's creative and injecting humor. I think not enough B2B brands really inject humor into their content, particularly their ads. So, Nicole, I really appreciate you sharing that one. Last but not least, Aubrey, what are your thoughts on this topic?
Yeah. That's quite interesting because I work in London Stock Exchange Group, and so basically it's a financial service business. So when it comes to delivering the message, we are more sensible, if that makes sense. But I do agree that sometimes we need to find a creative way to, speak to our audience directly. And based on my experience, other than using trigger emotion or using some humor, I think especially on LinkedIn, what we are trying to do is to speak directly to our prospects and try to make sure our message echo with their need. Because when we are doing advertising on LinkedIn, I believe this is probably one of the biggest advantage of LinkedIn platform is we are able to target at a specific job title, job role in specific industry or even company. So sometimes I did this kind of campaign quite a lot. When we are promoting, maybe it's a product, and instead of rolling one campaign and one kind of message and creativity to one group of audience, we kind of sit down and think about what's the value of this product. And it's normally very comprehensive value, and we could think about we have actually this product can deliver value to this group of people, but another group of people, they may see different value in the product. And this is where LinkedIn comes to play. We can actually do the audience segmentation and then create a different message and creativity to specific group. And even in our message, we kind of call out the job title of the target industry, target audience to make it more relevant to them. So when they see the ad, they know immediately what this is about. So for example, lately, in our company, we are promoting a wealth management report. It's a white paper. It's called the digitalization of wealth management. And so it's about digitalization. And I've seen this kind of advertising quite a lot. A lot of companies talking about digitalization, but sometimes it confuses me because digitalization can be applied everywhere. It could be something in marketing world. It could be something in business world. So this is where we, play the messaging. In the message, we call out the job title, learn about what kind of learn about digitalization for wealth managers or wealth advisors, and this makes the message clear and speak directly to the target audience. And of course, we have another set of advertising talking like a different language about the same white paper, but different language to a different group of persona. So in this way, I believe we kind of achieve the same, try to build this kind of emotional connection with our target audience based on the, this kind of unique feature on LinkedIn.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I wholeheartedly agree. I always use the example of if you're in a crowded mall, for example, and someone yells, "Hey," you may not turn around, but if someone yells, "Hey, wealth manager," for example, you may be like, look around and see what it is. So I think that it goes back to your point about kind of creativity standing out and definitely mentioning the specific role you're going after. And then on the back end, making sure the targeting is set up so it's aligned with that messaging, I think is great advice. We have some people joining us as well. Elise says, this goes back to Nicole's point. Yes to analogies. Those examples make messages and stories more relatable. Great insights. So yeah, guys, really good point. I'd love to hear from you guys as well. What are some of the keys in terms of messaging? Because I think that's one thing that a lot of people really struggle with. Aubrey, you mentioned matching it with, the job title and persona and things like that. What are some other things that you guys have done or seen other companies do well?
I think for LinkedIn ads, a big part of it is definitely the picture that you show. That it takes up most of the screen space. So I would say choosing the right photo is definitely important. It has to be eye-catching enough, and most importantly, it has to be relatable. So when I run LinkedIn ads, I had experience running LinkedIn ads with just pure text. It didn't really work well for me. But if I were to add a picture that reflects the target audience that I would like to reach out to. So for example, if I add a picture of someone looking like a CFO, CFOs actually have the tendency to click on the ad even more. So definitely for the picture, try to find pictures of actual people that makes it relatable to your target audience.
Yeah, I just want to add on to that because I think LucaNet and Nicole, we talked about this before, do an incredible job with this. I'm not a big believer of stock photos. I talk about this in my workshops and courses. But I think what LucaNet has done extremely well is they have these beautiful shots of their staff. So they're walking around in their office and they look, basically the part like financial executives like they are. So once again, it stands out because this is a big pet peeve of mine. I've seen too many, particularly in finance, education, banking, basically use the exact same photos. So I've seen multiple brands use the exact same photos. And going back to our discussion on creativity, it's not something that really stands out because you see the same thing over and over. It's like, okay, yeah, I've seen that across 3 different banks. So I will call out LucaNet because I think they do an incredible job of having these great photos of their staff. LinkedIn did that as well too. LinkedIn has some, if you look at their collaterals, a lot of them are their staff. So I think it's a great way to showcase your staff as well as to highlight and stand out. Lester, you guys have run a lot of different experiments and tests. What are something that has worked out or you've seen work out for some of your clients?
Well, I think much of it has been discussed already. Nicole, I think your company using a lot of real life examples, and that human touch is something that nowadays a lot of ad agencies, even asset research industry, is actually trying to bring back. If we can have a renaissance of the humanism in our industry, it's so much better because I think for the longest time we feel that B2B is quite distant. It's flat. Yes, we could fall into the overly, probably massive cloud of text, in our campaign, and using, there are a lot of tools out there making use of hero images, making use of stopping power. But stopping power is, I think, is just one thing. We need to think about the moving power. So stopping power is something that is, yes, it's the catch. Moving power is deployed by using emotions. And particularly about using emotions, we can actually inject happiness because happiness is something that triggers the most of your call to action. If you want to move something, inject happiness. And happiness is something that comes out if you feel people happy about resolving a friction, a problem area, or something that, for the longest time has not been attended to. And with that also, happiness is such an end state of the emotion. It's not transitory, which means it can land your brand to a long-lasting effect because that is part of the memory. It deposits into the human brain, and therefore, when the need arises for that particular category or particular experience that needs to be addressed, then your brand comes in because that emotion is actually a most powerful hook to your memory.
Yeah, interesting. I've heard, like I said, we'll have a friendly debate here. I've heard kind of the opposite. I mean, from the short term, I think to your point, of the long term, you look at brands who've done that very well. Coca-Cola, obviously, with their happiness campaigns. But if you look at short term, what I've heard based on the research is pains versus gains. So anytime you highlight a specific pain, you're more unlikely to provoke some kind of action. But I agree with you, over the longer term, if you're injecting a positive emotion to what you are doing, I think it has a better lasting impact overall. We're getting some feedback from the folks watching. This LinkedIn user says, "Hey, this is very timely. Thanks so much for the insights. Thanks so much for joining us." Elise says, "Quick question. Going back to the stock photos, what if you don't have photos of actual people from your company just yet? Will you discourage people from using stock images?" Any thoughts on this, guys? Otherwise, I can weigh in on this one.
Well, for me, maybe if I can answer and go ahead for me, so long as it tells the story, we have to go back to the core of the story. And the core of the story should be the highlight of the message. And the visual is something that is just an aid to what we're trying to convey. Particularly, because we know that boardroom people don't have a lot of time in the world. So we need to be able to be direct to the point, sharp. And if that's the message, the visual should support it.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe I'll jump in, and then Nicole and Aubrey, if you guys have any additional thoughts, we can get those as well too. But one thing that I've seen some companies do, I think it was either Accenture, who basically had, I think it was Accenture, Deloitte, one of them, who had stock photos, but they added different elements to it. So it made it stand out. It wasn't just a stock photo by itself. It had a symbol that represented the brand, or it had some kind of graphic that they had in all their specific posts, or a specific color. So I think that helped in terms of consistency and in terms of standing out. So it wasn't just a stock photo itself. That's easy to do. But they added some elements that were very much their specific brand. So I think that definitely helped out in terms of differentiation.
Yeah, and also one more thing I want to add on here is the human element is definitely important. And also we can also think beyond this kind of human element on image and think about other aspects we can address the user and make the user echo to the image. So for example, if we are, let's say, running a webinar talking about blah, blah, blah industry trend in Singapore, let's say, and instead of having a human face from stock image library, maybe we can also think about just have an image of Singapore, like the landscape, city view of the Singapore as a stock image. And at least when people see that, they say, oh, this is Singapore. And then when they read more about what this webinar is about, they realize that, yeah, this is a webinar about Singapore. So that's another way to use image to grab users' attention.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll add on to that. And like I said, I'd love to get your guys' thoughts too. I've seen that as well. So we were auditing a tech company last year. And one of the things we saw was like different ad variations because they had different business units. And the top performing ad that was ran was actually from a construction division within the company. And basically what you mentioned, they had, a photo of construction workers. It was very much aligned with kind of the target audience. And that one performed much better than the simple kind of graphics ones or the very generic photos. So I think, to your point, you can experiment with people, you can experiment with landscapes or even people from different industries, anything that represents that. I think the key is to make it look less stock photo. The key is to, once again, inject some of those elements we talked about earlier. So Aubrey, really, really good point there.
And maybe to just add on to the point about getting photos, I think now is extra difficult. With the current situation, we don't have the luxury of getting your colleagues to come back to office and take a really nice photo shoot together. But one point I really want to raise up is, does your photo really have to look extremely polished? Does it have to come out from a DSLR camera? Because I've actually seen companies like McKinsey and Bain, they have a few video clips of their webinars that just looks like the current setup that we have. So it's just someone talking to a camera, and that really captured my attention because that photo was so relatable, and that short clip really delivered a very important message. So sometimes maybe you do not need like the highest quality camera to take a really nice photo. You can just grab and extract content from your existing materials, like even your webinars.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've seen a lot of brands do that last year. I think Lazada ran a campaign around a specific initiative where it was just people recording on their phones. And I think that worked out quite well, especially given the situation last year. Like you said, you don't maybe have a full video production team. You don't have DSLRs available, but everyone has a phone. So you can create some very, simple yet relatable content off the back of your phones. And I think that's something that I'm constantly experimenting with. And I see other brands are doing that as well, too. Awesome. So we probably have time for one last tip, guys. I'd love to hear what is your final tip for folks who are embarking in LinkedIn ads or have been doing it for a while. What is one specific tip you would give to them? We'll start off with maybe Lester.
Yes, thanks, Joe. I think it's just easy to fall into the trap of the flatness, the text, the very traditional B2B thinking that we need to flood everything with our strategy, our campaigns out there. Nowadays, even the boardroom people can feel, they are looking for emotions, and of course guided by the human wisdom. And so please don't hesitate to use emotions. Be creative, express the thoughts, and of course, you need to follow, of course, your brand guidelines, your company guidelines in terms of branding, execution, and implementation of your messaging. But don't hesitate in terms of being natural, being genuine, and injecting a lot of happiness and surprise, because people need to feel that. People need to feel your product or your company in your messaging.
Awesome. We all need a little bit of Lester's happiness right now. Thank you so much, Lester. Let's go with Aubrey and then Nicole. Let's see. All right, let's go with Nicole for now.
Okay, I can share my tip while we wait for Audrey to come back. Aubrey,
Yeah.
I mean. So my tip would be, if you are ever out of ideas, steal it from your sales team. I mean, there are often times as a B2B marketer that you're just sitting in your office and you're totally out of ideas on what is the next campaign that you can run. But you can always speak with your internal team, especially those client-facing ones, because your sales team, they are people who interact with your target audience on the daily basis. They have the best idea on what is the right terminology to use, what is the right content that is really popular at the moment, and they can really give you great insights and ideas on what to do. So by speaking just with your sales team, I get tons of ideas that I can use for the rest of the year. So that's just my tip.
Absolutely great in terms of ideas, in terms of messaging. I'm a big believer of reverse engineering your content based on what your current prospects and clients are saying. So Nicole, really good point. Aubrey, last but not least, what is one tip that you would give to marketers?
Yeah, sure. Because we talk a lot about the creativity and ads messaging. Those are the typical topics that we always, think about when we think about advertising. But one thing I want to mention is when we are thinking about this kind of items, components on the surface, let's not forget about the data and technology beneath those, like advertising and creativity. Think about the big pictures. For example, with LinkedIn, how do you create a full funnel campaign with all the features available on LinkedIn, such as sponsored ads, sponsored message, and when is a good time to use LinkedIn lead gen form? And beyond the LinkedIn platform, how do you remarket to your website visitor via LinkedIn ads, or is form submission data from LinkedIn ads going into your marketing automation platform, and is it connected seamlessly to your CRM system? And also, are you collecting all the data from ad impression clicks all the way down to sales opportunity and actual dollar to make it to have a full view of effectiveness of the campaign. So those kind of things we need to think about, because those are not the things user can see on the surface. Those are kind of like an engine running behind the scene to deliver a very seamless digital experience. So, well, obviously, this is the kind of topic we can talk for like 1 hour, but I believe this is something we also need to think about when we are running LinkedIn ad campaign.
Yeah, Aubrey, that's a really good point, and I want to highlight that before we go. Maybe if you could share one example to your point of tracking the data from the LinkedIn ad you're doing to a sales process. If you could maybe share one example, I think that'd be super helpful.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So it's about connecting all the platforms together. Because think about it, we are running like a product campaign, and then firstly, well, the top funnel is how many people seeing the ad impression, and then out of that, how many people click the ad to find more details, and then out of that, how many people submit the form. And then after that, how many people actually converted to the sales lead? And next to that, how many people actually convert to sales opportunity and then generate the actual dollar? Because if we are able to connect the LinkedIn platform with marketing automation platform and CRM system to have this kind of full view of the data funnel, we are able to evaluate where goes well and where went wrong. So maybe for this campaign, we spent quite a lot. We got like a lot of leads, but we didn't convert any sales. There's no actual outcome, actual dollar coming out of this. And maybe we need to think about, maybe the lead quality is not really good. And back to Nico's point, maybe we need to speak to the sales and then check them. Okay, what do you think? You've been speaking with those leads, and what do you think? And maybe because the lead quality is not good, and then this would give you an insight about maybe your targeting is not very accurate. And also maybe from another perspective, maybe your ad is reaching out a huge amount of audience, get quite a lot of source impression, but your clicks rate is quite low. Only a few people click your ad. And then you need to think about maybe the creativity of my ad is going wrong, or maybe the ad messaging is not intriguing enough for people to click. So those are just few examples, but you can see the value of having this kind of full funnel of data, and you can evaluate at each stage and have some insights about where went wrong or where went well. So that's just a quick example about the power of data here.
Yeah, no, that's a beautiful example. I really, really appreciate you sharing. I think it really helps bring it to life, the points you were mentioning. We're getting some from fan mail. The LinkedIn user says, Nicole Wong, great tip on to ask the sales teams for inputs. Ria asks, very insightful talk. I love the tips. Quick question. What are your tips in creating post ads that have a lead in or call to action? Is it advisable to put the CTA call to action by the front of the copy? So, I mean, raising your hand,
Yeah, absolutely. I love this question because this is actually one point I want to bring up. Because when it comes to sales, this is actually something me and my colleagues at LSEC has been testing, is to put the call to make the very straightforward and clear call to action and put it up front. Because I've seen so many ads, they use call to action. Maybe they're promoting a product and they use call to action like learn more. And then I'd be confused because when I see the form and I'm submitting the form to learn more, but what I'm expecting, am I going to receive a phone call or receive an email with more product details? And this actually gets me confused sometimes. So from my perspective, I have to suggest that we make the call to action crystal and clear upfront. Things like request a callback or contact sales. And this kind of clear call to action can actually improve your lead quality because whoever submits the form, they know what to expect and they are ready to be contacted by the sales. And that can, based on our test result, this can really actually, improve the sales opportunity and the lead quality and all the way down to the sales.
Absolutely. I think it's a great example. This is something Nicole and I were talking about before the call, is the testing versus, like you said, generic call to actions like learn more versus a specific one so you know exactly where you're going to get. Really good tips, guys. Like I said, the fans are coming in. This one says, Aubrey Lin, thanks so much for the example. You guys are getting a lot of fan mail today, so I really appreciate you guys. like I said, there's been a lot of good discussion. For those of you watching or listening, I highly recommend you get in touch with our speakers today because there's so many great insights. I thank you guys so much. I really appreciate you guys coming on the show and taking the time. I know it's a very hectic time for many of you guys, so I really appreciate it and sharing your insights. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, guys.
And for everyone watching and listening, please do feel free to share this video with everyone you know. There's so many practical tips in here. I would watch it and then rewatch it. So thank you guys so much. Stay tuned. Please stay safe, and we'll see you next time. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.